Greetings, friends and future friends. Today's video is on the Korg Pa5x, and this video is about effects. I had a few comments. Some people asked me, John, can you show us how to install or insert an effects loop into our keyboard voicings or parts of our style? And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But something I want to share with you before we go in there and how we look at these effects systems, because there's two systems in there that you really need to know about. One is IFX and the other one is MFX. MFX, more of a master effects, and IFX, an individual effect. Now, what that means is in a master effects, it's a master effects and it's a reverb. And you apply that reverb to your keyboard, a guitar, voicing, and maybe a part of your drums. Now, if you change that effect anyway, or maybe change it to a chorus or something, you're going to also change the sound of those different voicings because it's a master effect and you're applying it to the keyboard, the guitar, and the drums. So now when you change that reverb or change whatever effect you have on there, you're also changing the effect on the keyboard, the drums, and the guitar at the same time. Where an IFX is an individual effect and that gets placed on the voicing itself. So in other words, if you put a chorusing on a bass track, you'll have that chorus on the bass track, and if you change it, you're not going to affect anything else but that bass track. So that's the two big things we're going to look at when we go in there. So let's get into the studio and see how those things work. Okay, before I zoom into the screen, and a little side note, I like to zoom into the screen because sometimes I even watch my own tutorials to catch up on things, and I like to have that full screen on my phone. So we'll zoom into the screen. But before we do, I just want to go over a couple things on the deck of the keyboard. That way when I'm saying, hey, I'm using this or that, you'll know what I'm talking about. So we know the X fader, that's going between player 1 and player 2. And of course we know how to start. The players are right here. You know, if you hit shift and hit this player, it'll start both players. The pads are right here. Then your keyboard sets, remember, are right down here too. You know, I want keyboard set 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now there's another thing I want to show you. Let's go to controls. Now on the deck we have main. When you have it main, you have all these sliders work this. And the sliders in the screen are the same sliders we're going to be using over here. And keypad, now we're doing upper 1, upper 2, upper 3, and the 4 pad volumes are here. Song, now this is basically, I can actually adjust the bass, the drums, and everything from the sliders. And editor, this is for the sound. You can actually change the sound, you know, the resonance, cut off, all that. And then user basically is like the overall general. You have the MP3 volume, you know, cut off. It's overall performance of the keyboard. But let's go. Today we're going to be using keyboards. So when we're over here now, one thing I want to talk about too when you're using these sliders is like, okay, I'm on slider 7, which slider 7 would actually be upper 2. And you're going to see I'm moving the slider and nothing's happening. It's kind of got a latch effect. So what it's got to do is this slider on the deck of the keyboard has to catch up with the slider on the screen in order for it to work. So I'm moving that slider up and down and it's not working. But if I go all the way to the top and back, now you can see that the slider's moving on the screen and it's moving here. And basically we're going to same here with the slider 8. That's the one we're going to be using today. And upper 1's not doing anything. But if I go up all the way to the end where it was and bring it down, now it works. So now I actually have slider 2 and slider 1 working. That's something I want you to be aware of because we're going to be using that in this tutorial. Okay, we're all zoomed into the screen right now. So let's go to Mixer, check out these effects. Now we're going to tap on the little icon right there for the mixer. And you can see we have the main, and of course if we go up there we can select our sound. And I want to go to EQ because that's kind of the first effect that we want to talk about. Now, a couple things. One thing you can EQ, you got a high, mid, and low. And you can turn it on and off. So if we go over here and add, let's cancel out this, we'll go up here and make this real high. and add some bottom end. We can actually turn it on and turn it off. And you can hear the difference, especially on that high end. Go back here to the highs. Now, one cool thing, what you can do is just tap this little gear and it brings up this screen. And of course, you want your trim at 99. You want it to bring in the most from that signal. But current track reset. So you can see we have the EQ set up in a weird way, kind of. We hit the reset. Now you've just reset that keyboard, or that keyboard upper one channel to 0, 0. And if we exit out of this, let's say we go this and mess this up here and go there and go here, and then we go all the way to the lower and bring that all up. And now you have them all on. You have this EQing. And now you say, you know what? I don't want all that. You can go over here, and now you can say keyboard set tracks reset. So you can see we have EQ'd all four, the upper one, upper two, upper three, and lower. And if we go over to this gear and hit that button right there, now you've just reset these all back to 0. And that's the EQ for the keyboard set. And it works the same over here for the pads. So if we're going to bring over here and bring up this pad, we can EQ that, make it higher. Stop it. And the same thing, we can bring up the gear, touch the gear settings. Now I can reset that track, and if you watch over here, this will go to 0. Or what I can do is, if we do the same thing like we did over here on the keyboard sets, we make this all different EQing, and it's all different. Now we hit on any of these gears, settings, and go pad tracks reset. Now when we exit out of it, you can see that the EQ has been set to 0 on the pads. That's a pretty helpful little tool to have. When you get into EQing, and sometimes you EQ and you get into a mess and you want to say, hey, I got to start all over again, you just hit the reset and everything goes back to 0. Now that same process of resetting the EQ works for the style. So if we come down here and hit style, now this is our style. Our bass, drum, percussion, accompaniment 1 through 5. And if we go over here and we EQ this, we can come up here, turn it on and off. We can hit the little gear control and say, okay, current track, we want to reset this to 0, or do we want to reset all the tracks to 0? So if we hit this reset, boom, this all went to 0. Now remember, when you hit that 0 button and it resets it, you can't go back. So sometimes what I do is say, okay, 5, 6, 3. Okay, 5, 6, 3. I had 5 on the highs, 6 on the mids, and 3 on the low. That way, I'll know that if I ever have to come back. But same process works here for the EQ for the style. Okay, let's go from styles, go back to pads and keyboard, and let's go into insert effects. Now, basically, we're working on upper one, so you actually have 3 inserts that you can place in here. Now you have it off. We turn it on for first thing, and then tap on the 3 dashes, brings you up to this screen. Then you come up to bypass. Now, remember, if you need to go back to bypass, if you're on one of these screens, you need to go back to bypass. You actually hit bypass, exit, and when you exit again, you're going to see it's back to 3 dashes. Let's go in here and add a delay, say stereo multiple tap delay, exit, and now you have the delay and you can adjust the settings. And if we exit out of that, we turn it off. And we turn it on. and pretty cool stuff. We also go down here to effects 2, go on, tap on it, and maybe we add some reverb. So now let's go back, exit, that's our reverb, exit, and now we have, if we turn off the delay, we'll just have the reverb. Turn the delay back on. And if we go, we actually can add another one, turn that effects on, go. And let's go into modulation and add a chorus. You know what? Let's go into frequency and pitch shift. And if we exit out of that, exit out of everything. If we get rid of the delay, now we just have the pitch going on effects 3. Now watch, I'm going to show you a little trick. What we're going to do here to effects 3 is we got the reverb going on and the actual pitch delay. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to make this the reverb and make that the reverb, nice reverb hall, exit, and go back. And now we're going to change effects 3 to that pitch, modulation, frequency, pitch shift. Go exit out and exit out, and we'll turn this on. So now what we did is to switch these things around so our pitch will change and it'll actually add to the reverb. And then what we'll do is we'll turn on the delay, and then what it's going to do is the delay is going to be on the original keyboard set, but the pitch will stay and it won't be changed with the delay. So we'll have this. So you can hear that. It's a pretty cool sound. So the pitch is following these notes, but the delay is actually following these notes. So when we turn the reverb on, now remember, this is a sequential system. So the effects 1 goes into effects 2, goes into effects 3. So right now, because I have the pitch off, we're only getting the keyboard sound and the delay and the reverb. We add the pitch. And that's the individual effect. Okay, that's how we can put an effect loop into our upper 1, upper 2, upper 3, and lower keyboard and the pads. But we can also go to Style and do the same thing. Now, I brought up this guitar track, and if we play it, and you can see already on effects 1, somebody's put a Vox amp simulator in there. And if we exit back out of this, you can hear the difference when we turn it on and off. Now with that amp simulator, it makes that guitar sound more real sounding. So let's get down here and we'll add effects. We'll turn that effects on. And let's go to modulation and add a chorus. Now let's exit out of this. And let's turn the chorus off and play it. And hear what it sounds like when we turn it on. sounds really cool. You can hear the difference with the chorus on and off. And again, we could add another thing if we came down here and added reverb, hall reverb, and exit and turn that hall reverb on. Now we have so here's the original sound, and then I'll turn on each effect as I go down. And that's how you can add an effect to a accompaniment. Now that's how you can insert an effects loop into the guitar of this style, or any of the accompaniments. You do the same thing. Everything's the same except for the drums. So let's unsolo that guitar, solo the drums, move over here. Now, in a way, you can do the same thing. We come over here and add a reverb, hall reverb, exit out of it. We have a hall reverb, turn this on, and now we have reverb on the drums. And if we turn it off, but that could get a little messy with all that reverb. Now what we can do, let's go back here and bypass that. Make sure we bypass it. Exit, exit, and turn it off. What's really neat about the drum system in the Korg Pa5x is it has the drum mixer. But also when you're in this menu, you can see this little drum set. If you click on that, now it brings up the drum set. So we have the drums now. There's nothing, no effects on anything. If we come over here to the snare, go effects, go reverb, hall reverb, exit out of that, turn it on. Now we've just added reverb just to the snare. And if we get a little crazy, we can go over here to the hi-hat, go to frequency. I think it's frequency, or is it filter? Two voice resonance. Exit out of this, turn it on. And now you're going to hear a little bit of a phase shifting frequency shift in the hi-hat. Really cool stuff. So again, when you see this little icon, and even in some pads, when you have a pad that has a drum set as its sample bank, you're going to see this little drum icon. You tap on it, and it brings up this menu, and I can add effects to all the individual drum tracks by themselves. Now that we know how to use the insert effects, let's look into the master effects. We'll tap on that icon. Now we have master effects. Now, one thing you got to look at, because this is something you're going to have to think about when you're editing your master effects. You have Master Effects A and Master Effects B. So these master effects are basically on the tail end of the signal, of the sound going out of the keyboard. And another little note, a real important note, is these effects will not be affected in channels 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, for me, I have left and right my accompaniments, and then 1 and 2 is my drums, and 3 and 4 are my bass. And I noticed that on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, when I put on the effects on the drums, it didn't have any change in that sound. So these effects, A and B, will only go out to left and right. So that's one thing you got to think about. But I want you to take a look at that, because when we go down to effects end, you're going to see on the top, you're going to see like we got the style going on here, and that's all A going across. But if we go back to pads and keyboards, you're going to see that the pads are A, but the keyboards are B. And that's something you got to think about, because the upper 1, upper 2, upper 3, and lower are going to go to a different set of master effects. And if we go back to the master effects, this master effects, reverb, stereo chorus, and stereo flanger is on effects A, and then we have reverb, smooth hall, and delay on master effects B. So that's something you need to think about when you're looking at these things. Again, back to effects send. When we're in the pads, A, and then the keys are B, and we go to style, they're all A. So let's just stay with the drums here for a minute. And we notice we have that little icon. So now we're at Master Effects Send. And again, we go to Master Effects. We know we have reverb, stereo chorus, stereo flanger on A. Go to Master Effects Send. And we know we're in A, so that's what we're going to have. So we can actually do the same thing. We can actually add what would be the reverb, chorus, and flanger. So this would be reverb, chorus, and flanger to the whole drum set, or else we can come up here and add. So let's start this up and add a little reverb to the snare drum, and maybe a little flanger too. You can actually hear the flanger on that snare now. Sounds weird, but you know you can do it. And if we go over to the hi-hat, let's add some flanger to the hi-hat. You can hear it there. It's light, but it's there. But what this means is I can add effects 1, 2, and 3 to any individual instrument of the drums. And again, that's in A, which would mean we go to Master Effects A. That means reverb, stereo chorus, or stereo flanger I could add to the individual instruments in the drum tracks. That's really cool stuff. Okay, now let's look at the keyboards. Upper 1. Now, if we go back to Master Effects, we know we're in B, because when we exit out of this or go to Effects Send, we see B. And if we go to Master Effects, we know B is reverb on FX1, FX2 is bypassed, and FX3 is multi-tap. So let's go over here to FX2 and make that a frequency. Would make this a pitch shift. Exit out of that, turn this on, and then we go to FX Send, and if we bring that up, if we make that 100 or 127, and basically we have that pitch going on. We got a little reverb. Really cool. Let's get rid of the pitch now. Now, what we also have is a delay on FX3. So what's that sound like? Because remember, we added a delay on FX3. We make that. Really cool. And again, it's back to the Master Effects B. And again, just like anything else, you tap on this, bring up any of the effects. We go over here. We can bring up any type of effect. Once we bring it up, we can actually set it. Now, I'm going to tell you this right now in the middle of this.
when you make changes to the keys, and if we're in the mixer and we're going into the main, when you make changes to things that are like the style, those changes will only stay when you save the style. So if I add an effect to one of these parameters, one of these accompaniments, or one of these tracks in the style, if I want to save those effects, I have to come over here and hit Save Style. Now, when I'm in pads and keyboards, when you make any changes, when you go to Effect Sends or any of these effects, you save it, and then you'd have to come up here and say Save Key Set to either the style or save the key set to your library and bring it up later. So that's one thing you have to think about. That's the only thing that really, I don't understand why they didn't do it, because when I bring up this effects, I can change it and do all these crazy things with it, but I can't save it as my effect. But what I can do is when I save this key set, and if I'm going over here and we'll go back to the main and I go keys, when I save this key set right here, piano, it's going to save all those settings that I made with the effects. So when we go into mixer and we have keys and pads, all these changes I made will save to that key set. And you got to remember that, because if you don't, then you're going to lose these settings. All right, I want to show you something that can be helpful. If you have a style that you really like, and you like that same style with a lot of effects, or maybe something to make it really change and be different, we can bring in style 1 into player 1 and that same style in player 2. And like I showed you before, I have Chain the Fools version 1 and Chain the Fools version 2. Now, whatever you save to that style when it comes to effects is going to be there too. If we're on Master Effects, we're in player 1, you can see that that style has a stereo flanger. But if we go over to player 2, you see it doesn't have any effects. So what does that mean? What that means is when you're playing these styles and you can change things and put effects or whatever you want to do on this second version, you can do that, or the first version. And then all you're going to do is slide over. So if I was playing somewhere out, let's go back to that mixer. If I was playing somewhere and I wanted to play this style, but now I want to play it with some heavy delay or reverb, I just go like this, and now it's got a stereo flanger on it that it didn't have. But it would be the same style, but now you can save those effects to that style and switch back and forth real quick from one style to another, giving you effects and taking effects away. Now, here's a little trick you can do. I still haven't figured out a way to turn these effects on and off during play, but here's how I figured it out. Now, what we've done is we've taken, if we go back to our key sets, I have two sounds that are identical. So let's go back to our mixer, go back here, and then I put a little reverb, because remember, we go to our master effects on B, we have a multi-tap delay, pitch shifter, and reverb hall. So let's go back to Ascends, and I put upper 2 and upper 1. I have a little bit of reverb. But what we're going to do is we're going to take effects 1 and bring that up to 127. Okay, and then we're going to bring this up to 75, let's say, which then means that on upper 1, we go to Master Effects, we're going to have the stereo multi-tap delay and a pitch shifter. So the stereo multi-tap delay and the pitch shifter will be engaged in upper 1. So let's go back to Effects Send. And remember, we're going to go to the slider on the keyboard, and I've got slider 8 going up and down. You can see it right there. And basically, when we have upper 1 off, we have. But when we bring upper 1 in, listen to the effect. Now you can see the sound difference between upper 1 and upper 2. So if I'm still just playing this E and I play upper 2, you have a little bit of reverb. But when I play upper 1, so that's a way you can actually use these effects while you're playing, or whether it's live or in the studio. You can take two identical sounds, bring them together, and then control their volume with the sliders on the deck of the keyboard.
So I hope this video gave you a little bit more information on how to use the effects in the Korg Pa5x. Some pretty great stuff. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. You'll help us grow the channel, and that way we can bring you more cool stuff. So take care, my friends, and thanks for watching.